This morning I got up and did my usual routine, got ready, went out for breakfast, and I don't know, I was more efficient than I usually was. When I looked at the clock, it was 10 to 8, and something clicked in my brain. I thought, well, it's 10 minutes till church is supposed to start. I ran up here and turned on the lights. Nobody was here yet. Turned on the cameras and got everything ready and looked out. It's 2 minutes till. Nobody's here. Felt like one of those dreams you have where, you're trying to. Then I realized, you idiot. Well, you're a hairheader, buddy. I left, went home for a few minutes, and came back. And when I got back, there was people here, so it felt better. Oh, stuff happens. I scrolled back a slide or two to see where we ended off, and Paul had just been talking about, kind of defending his apostleship and all the things that he had been through and all the sufferings he had been through and such, and that's where we kind of pick up this week. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, miracles and credentials. Well, Paul's getting to the point now he's kind of summing things up. Starting in verse 11, he says, I am become a fool in glorifying, yet ye have compelled me. Now what he's saying is, I wouldn't normally boast about myself, but you all have pushed me into it. For I ought to have been commended of you, for in nothing am I behind the very chiefest apostles. Some versions call it preeminent apostles. Though I be nothing, truly the signs of an apostle were wrought among you in all patience, and signs and wonders and mighty deeds. For what is it wherein you were inferior to other churches? Except it be that I myself was not burdensome to you. Forgive me this wrong. So again, he said there in verse 11, I know I've been boasting here for a minute, but you all have put me in a position where you've been listening to these preeminent or chief apostles that are coming around, and they're bringing fancy letters from people talking about their accomplishments or whatever, and they've found a way to make money off the gospel. And Paul's been put into a position where he's had to defend himself, and he says, it's foolish that I'm having to do this. He said, of all the people, why would I have to commend myself to you guys? I came here, stayed with you all for a long time, preached among you, taught you, helped establish your churches. If anything, shouldn't that be having to defend myself to you? You should be commending me. He said, in nothing am I behind these very chiefest or preeminent apostles, or whatever your version calls them. He said, I'm not behind them, even though I realize I'm nothing. I'm not behind them. And, of course, Paul was something. If Paul hadn't been the man he was, we wouldn't have all the letters in the New Testament, and the church probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground and all that. But he realizes as a human being without Christ, he is nothing. So he's making those arguments. He's saying, it's foolish to put the focus on me when it should be on God, but you drove me to it by comparing me with these super apostles. Truly the signs of an apostle were wrought among you. So Paul was able to perform the miraculous spiritual gifts that he had among them in all patience. He completed signs and wonders and mighty deeds in their presence. So maybe the super apostles were misusing the spiritual gifts, maybe not. Maybe he's just talking about his own work. He says, for what is it wherein you were inferior to other churches? Or how did I treat you any less than I did any other church that I went to? Except this one thing. I was not a burden to you. I didn't ask you all to support me financially. Forgive me this wrong. So I don't know exactly how this point was turned on him, but because he didn't take money from them, somehow these super apostles or whatever they were has somehow twisted that to make it look like, he was inferior to them in some way. So anybody want to say anything about those verses? Any thoughts? Feedback? So the only way he treated them differently was not being a financial burden to them. All right. Moving along, the next section, according to the author who organized the daily Bible I use, he calls this section No Ulterior Advantage. So down in verse 14, behold, the third time I am ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you, for I seek not yours, but you. For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. And I will very gladly spend and be spent for you. Though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. But be it so, I did not burden you, nevertheless, being crafty, I caught you with guile. Did I make a gain of you by any of them whom I sent unto you? I desired Titus, and with him I sent a brother. Did Titus make a gain of you? Walked we not in the same spirit? Walked we not in the same steps? Let's see if we can break these thoughts down in context with what we've been reading in this chapter. So he's been to them twice, and he's saying, hey, I'm ready to come a third time. I wasn't a financial burden to you before. I didn't seek your private possessions. I didn't seek your funding. What I sought when I was with you was you. I sought for your soul to be saved. I sought a spiritual gain when I was with you, not a financial gain, not a worldly gain. And he uses this analogy, the children ought not lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. So he's just saying, as a parent to this church, I made the sacrifices for you guys. You all didn't have to make it to me. Now, he's not saying churches shouldn't support their preacher. He has taken funding from other churches. But with this particular congregation, whatever the issue is, he's just making the point. I was not a financial burden to you. So apparently he's coming a third time. Well, I don't know exactly. On his first missionary journey, Corinth is over here. On his first missionary journey, didn't go over that direction. On his second missionary journey, he did get over there. On his third missionary journey, what some people call his third missionary journey, was arrested and taken to Rome, he doesn't go by there. So I'm not exactly sure what he means by the third visit, but just because I can't pick it out doesn't mean that he didn't do it. Not every step he took was recorded in such a way that I can figure it out. So he still, when he comes back, he still doesn't plan on charging them anything for his services.
It's kind of interesting why he makes it so important that they know that he's not interested in it. He's not doing it for money.
God, I guess God knew what each church would struggle with. And for whatever reason, the church at Corinth there, they had a lot of struggles. And apparently one of them had something to do with paying preachers. Now, some group had moved in there and they were raising some money, and Paul wasn't. Somehow they were using that against him to say, well, he must be inferior to us. He doesn't even think what he's teaching is worth funding. But I guess God knew there was going to be some issue that was going to be raised, and that Paul would need to make this point among this church. The focus, of course, is that we should first think about spiritual things before we think about physical things. And that if you're going to be a preacher or try to spread the gospel, that your motivation should not be to elevate yourself or financial gain. Well, it's not wrong to be funded. That should not be your primary motivation. Your primary motivation should be for spiritual gain. So he's saying he will spend himself on them, meaning he will come again and not take money from them, but he will spend his time and his effort trying to save them spiritually. Anybody have any thoughts about this? I love you, the less I be loved. It must be discouraging to Paul to know how much of himself he's poured into this church and still has to defend himself to them. That some other group could move in and discredit him, and a group that he spent so much time with that they should be commending him. Instead, they're not. I guess that's, for someone that loves and prays for the churches as much as Paul did, that'd be pretty discouraging.
Sometimes you try to do something out of the goodness of your heart, and people take the wrong idea. They think you're up to something or whatever. They're not accustomed to people being good to them.
So all the more reason why we need to have communication with people, isn't it? Because intentions can be misunderstood. I was thinking about, as Brother Raymond was giving his lesson today, like the kids down at the camp where I work, they typically come from a fairly chaotic environment without a lot of structure and maybe good moral teachings and things like that. And they come down to a campus that's very structured, with very clear rules and consequences for not following those rules. And they'll typically struggle for a couple weeks to adjust. But when they do adjust, that structure and stuff, they find a security and a safety in it. There's a consistency to it, and they know the rules, and they can adjust themselves to succeed in that structured system where people are trying to help them. And over time, as a society, I guess there was a time when we were more spiritual focused and Bible focused and church focused, and people live more by the rules of the church and the Bible. And as society has slowly moved the goalposts and got the focus more on fleshly things instead of spiritual things, it has become more challenging as a society. Because so many members of our society doesn't have spiritual things as their ultimate moral authority. Their ultimate moral authority is themselves. And they expect everyone to bend around their ideals of what's right and wrong, instead of everyone just agreeing, hey, there's a standard package of moral teachings we all have to live within. It makes it difficult. I guess the pendulum swings back and forth over time with this stuff. If the nation doesn't crumble and fall like any nation eventually does, the pendulum will swing back and forth. I was also thinking in the Old Testament how many times that God let his people be almost completely destroyed, only preserving a remnant. And that remnant got to reap the benefits. You think about Noah's Ark. There was a small remnant of people preserved. And then you think about when the Promised Land was conquered and they were all defeated, and the Babylonians and the Assyrians took them, and there was a remnant that was preserved that got to come back to the Promised Land. So God has preserved a remnant so that things can reset and restart when that needs to happen. And I guess the church today, you look around at a lot of churches and attendance isn't what it used to be. Maybe God's preserving that remnant for when the time comes. Anyway, I'm off topic. Anybody have any thoughts about verse 15 or any of the side track I got on there for a minute?
I'm not so sure there's sidetrack. It's pretty much down the middle.
Verse 16. But be it so, I did not burden you, nevertheless, being crafty, I caught you with guile. So he's saying, man, I'm so crafty that somehow it was a trick that I didn't take money from you. I caught you up in this trick of mine. He's being sarcastic, trying to point out how silly it is for them to think something's wrong with him because he wouldn't be a financial burden to him. So some people are spinning it in such a way, they're saying, look at this crafty fellow. He's not as good as us. He's not even worth payment. And they've somehow twisted that. Anybody have any thoughts about that? He goes on to say, did I make a gain of you by any of them who I sent unto you? He's saying, not only did I not take money from you, the people I sent to you to check up on you, they didn't take money from you either. I didn't make a gain of you then. I didn't make a gain of you off anybody else.
You could think that they wouldn't, because he didn't take money, that would not be a point of criticism. And you think that would be a point of, they would like that. They would, you think that.
Yeah, I guess these crafty super apostles that came in, was somehow saying, hey, we're we're giving you something so valuable, you owe us some money. What he's selling isn't even worth asking for payment.
It was pure human thought. Their thought process was, we're going to do this for somebody for our personal gain. Then you come in and you don't take personal gain. It's a trick. We know, lots of people have said that behind the scenes, you guys are working and you're going to trick us too. You're going to get something out of this. Well, that's their mind. That was on them. It wasn't on the apostles.
You may be right. They may have been so conditioned to think that everything's done for personal gain that if someone's doing it not for personal gain, there must be some ulterior motive. He sent Titus and others to them, and they didn't charge either. He said, I desired Titus, and with him I sent a brother. Did Titus make gain of you? Did he collect money from you? Didn't he walk in the same spirit I walked in? Didn't we all walk the same steps? He's saying, listen, I didn't send him to bring money. I sent him to check on your spiritual condition. That's what I'm interested in. That's what he was interested in. So again, Paul's having to defend himself. So no one associated with Paul was a financial burden. This next section is called a reason for defense. So he's going to try to explain why he feels like he has to defend himself to this church. Again, think ye that we excuse ourselves unto you. We speak before God in Christ, but we do all things, dearly beloved, for your edifying. For I fear lest when I come I shall not find you such as I would, and that I shall be found unto you such as ye would not, lest there be debates, envyings, wraths, strifes, backbitings, whisperings, swellings, tumults. Unless when I come again, my God will humble me among you, and that I shall bewail many which have sinned already, and have not repented of their uncleanness and fornication and lasciviousness which they have committed. Well, that's a interesting King James language. In summary, what Paul's saying is, I'd rather when I come to find you all focused on the right things, being spiritual and being humble, so that when I come, I don't have to be forceful and mean, spiritually, pushy or whatever. But there's a lot of you that you haven't learned your lesson yet, and you're doing a lot of things you shouldn't be doing. And I would rather not find you that way, but if I find you that way when I get there, all of y'all that claiming I'm weak when I'm present, but strong in my letters, you're going to find out when I get there. So he says, I'm not making excuses for not charging you. The fact is, I didn't charge you in order to build you up. He's saying everything that I did when I was with you, it was for your edifying. I didn't charge you, but I was doing spiritual things, dearly beloved, for your edifying. I was trying to build you guys up spiritually. He said, I fear lest when I come, I shall not find you such as I would. How he hopes to find them is doing the right things. But instead, he's afraid that he shall find them such as he would rather not find them. And he hopes when he comes, there doesn't have to be debates, and they're not having envy and wraths and strifes and backbitings and whisperings and swellings and tumults. He hopes that's not what he finds when he gets there. He hopes he doesn't have to deal with this stuff. He hopes whatever issues these super apostles are stirring up isn't going to tear everything to pieces, and when he gets there, he's going to have to try to put everything back together because they've done stirred up all this controversy while he's been away. Unless when I come again, my God will humble me among you, and that I shall be well many which have sinned already. So I'll deal with those who have sinned if this is still going on when I get there. If they've not repented of their uncleanliness and fornications and lasciviousness which they've committed. So, of course, Corinth started out with problems, and then these people come in and stirred that all back up. And, Paul's trying to help them deal with all this kind of stuff and be spiritually focused. And they've done shifted the topic someplace else, and they're missing the point. And he's trying to deal with it. He hopes they've not been so distracted by all these distractions of the super apostles that they can't deal with their own real problems, that they've been distracted to the point where they've lost focus of spiritual things and got too overly focused on worldly and material things. Anybody have any thoughts about those verses?
That edifying, that's like a spiritual feeding, isn't it? I mean, it's, when you think about it, try to build them up or edify them or try to strengthen them.
Yeah. Well, I hope all of us, when we come to church, come to church with a attitude of trying to build instead of destroy. It's easy to find anywhere you go, including in the church, people that don't see everything exactly like you and do things a little different. And if you want to throw the spotlight over that, boy, you can create all kinds of problems. Every little thing that didn't go just like you thought it ought to have went, it can turn into some mountain that you're going to argue and tear up the church over. Or you're going to come in and have some grace and mercy and love, and if there's disagreements, have conversations and compromise. And I'm not saying compromise what's ultimately right, but there's an awful lot of opinion that we should compromise on instead of getting tore up about it. Anyway, any more thoughts? 2 Corinthians 13. Regarding troublemakers. Oh, there's been some troublemakers while he's been away. Would never guess that could happen anywhere. This is the third time I'm coming to you. In the mouth of two or three witnesses shall every word be established. I told you before, and I foretell you, as if I were present. The second time, and being absent now, I write to them which heretofore have sinned, and to all other, that if I come again, I will not spare, since ye seek a proof of Christ speaking in me, which to you word is not weak, but is mighty in you. For though he was crucified through weakness, yet he liveth by the power of God. For we also are weak in him, but we shall live with him by the power of God toward you. All right, again, good King James language that makes all this perfectly clear to understand. So he says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So, he's saying you need truth to be something that people agree on and testify to. And maybe these people that have come in have distorted the truth. And he's saying, I told you before and I'm telling you again, I hope in my absence, when I'm having to send you these letters to try to correct you guys that are sinning, that when I come again to you in person, you better believe when I come this time, I'm not going to overlook all this stuff. I'm not going to spare this. I'm going to deal with it. Apparently, some of those that have just criticized him have said, well, Paul there, he's weak. We went over this a few weeks back. He's weak when he's here in present. Not a great speaker, pretty timid. Now, he's boastful and big when he writes these letters. Paul does not strike me as someone that's weak. He's probably one of the strongest people you'll see in the Bible, and we know that God was working through him with the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So not only was he just a strong person in general, he had the power of God working with him. So he's going to deal with them when he gets present. Since you seek a proof of Christ speaking in me, which to you word is not weak, but is mighty in you. So maybe they're saying they want proof that Christ is actually working in him. Maybe there's people that's saying, hey, he's weak when he's in person. Maybe he's saying, I've given you all spiritual teachings. You should be mighty spiritual people at this point, but you're losing focus. Christ is mighty in Paul, and Christ should be mighty in them too. That's what he taught them, but that's not what they're acting like. They're being influenced by other outside influences, pulling them back to their old ways or pulling them astray. They're not doing things to build up the church spiritually. They're focusing on the wrong things and they're tearing the church down. Paul's talking to them about that. You want proof of my strength? You all are criticizing me, undercutting me. Well, when I get there, I'll be strong. Then he says, well, Jesus, if you want to look at it from a certain point of view, he was weak when he allowed himself to be crucified. He didn't have the power to overcome his own death. But really, there was nothing weak about Christ dying. He didn't have to die. He could have called legions of angels. He chose to die. He chose to take that high spiritual road when it would have been easier not to have taken it. And we all know what happened in Gethsemane when he was there and lamenting, and God, I'd rather not go through this, but if it's your will, I'll do it. And we already pointed out in earlier verses last week, sometimes God uses weak people. And he did in the Old Testament many times to do very great things because it illustrates where the power is coming from. It's coming from God. So in our weakness, we can be very strong because the power of God is working in us. So our physical bodies may be weak, but through Christ, we can be strong. Now, Paul had the power of the gifts of the Holy Spirit working with him too. So he had extra layer of strength that's not available to us. But okay, anybody have any thoughts about anything we've covered so far? I'm trying to get the gist of this, of what I think he's teaching, even though the wording is a little challenging. Okay, the bell is rung. I don't know if I want to get into the new section just yet. This morning when I was reading the daily Bible that we use, I came across a verse that we've been studying on Wednesday nights about they're getting ready to go in and conquer Jericho. That's where we're at on Wednesday night, right there. They just crossed the Jordan and marched around Jericho, the walls fell, all that. They're just starting their conquest of the Promised Land. Who didn't make it into the Promised Land? The ones that didn't make it. So, everyone that was numbered in the first census, they numbered the ones that was military age, those 20 and older. When they went to spy out the Promised Land, 10 of the spies came back and said, yeah, it's a beautiful land flowing with milk and honey, but we can't take it. The walls are too high, the people's too strong. And they spread this false and discouraging report among the people, except for Joshua and Caleb. But these negative thoughts took over. They didn't get to go into the Promised Land. God said, well, you all spent 40 days up there, the spies did, so you're going to spend 40 years now marching around in the wilderness, and all these people that was counted in the first census, they're going to die off. And the people that's going to get the Promised Land is going to be the ones that survive, those 19 and under. The ones that you thought were going to be enslaved and mistreated, they're the ones that's going to get to go and enjoy the benefit. So those 19 and under. In Deuteronomy 138, it says, moreover, your little ones, which he says should be a prey, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge between good and evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. What stands out to me when I read that, though, is it says, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge of good and evil. Those that was 19 and under, God says they weren't old enough to understand good and evil. I'm not going to hold that against them. We'll hold it against everybody that's old enough to understand. Now, I know that stands out to me because I know people have the debate today about if you're a child, does God hold things against you and all that. God understands when you reach a certain age that you get it. And there's a time before that you don't. And to me, that verse illustrates that there's a time when God considers you too young to understand right and wrong. He doesn't hold you accountable in the same way that he does people that are older. Now, I don't know if that means the age of accountability is 20 or something different. Just the principle is there that God does understand. There's people that may be mentally incompetent or too young to understand right and wrong. So every time I read that verse, that stands out in my brain. Anybody have any thoughts about that? You may not agree with that. That's my personal view of that verse, but that's what it means to me. Yes, ma'am?
Remember Rex, he has his father Calvin at the hospital now, undergoing some tests and stuff. Just remember them, please.
Rick?
Rex Cassidy.
Oh, Rex. I thought you said Rick.
His father, Calvin.
Okay. Everybody hear that? Rex's father, Calvin's in the hospital, and I think that he's been living with them some. Is that?
They live with him.
They live with him. Okay, so they're providing care, and that can be a challenge.
It is.
Yeah, but it's sweet that they're doing that, and obviously, if we can, we should take care of our folks when the time comes. Thank goodness for nursing homes, though. When someone needs more care than you're able to give, some skilled nursing care and treatment that you're not equipped to give, there's places that they can go where they can get that level of care. Anybody else have a comment or thought? All right. Anybody want to volunteer to say the closing prayer? I'll say it. Oh, wait, Curtis jumps in there. I don't want to take it away from you, Curtis. Go ahead. Thank you.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day, the opportunity we've had to come together to study your word and to learn more about what you want expected of us. We pray now, Heavenly Father, when we leave this building, that you go with us and give us a safe journey and give us the opportunity